Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Gossips 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The truth comes out in a way no one at Forrester Creations ever expected, not with a dramatic press conference or a carefully planned family meeting, but through a series of quiet, devastating moments that slowly piece together a secret buried for decades. A secret that ultimately shatters Ridge Forrester's understanding of his own life, because it begins on an ordinary morning when Ridge walks into his office expecting nothing more than another day of designs, deadlines, and unresolved tension. With Brooke and Taylor, only to sense immediately that something is off, the air heavier, the silence louder, the kind of silence that tells you people have been talking behind closed doors and stopped the moment you arrived. And while Ridge brushes it off at first, telling himself he's being paranoid, that the Forrester family thrives on secrets and drama, the feeling refuses to go away, following him through the halls, lingering in the way Donna avoids his eyes, in the way Eric hesitates before speaking, in the way Brooke's face pales when she sees him, as if she's looking at a ghost instead of the man she's loved and fought with for years, and Ridge, never one to ignore his instincts, presses Brooke immediately, asking her what's wrong, why everyone is acting like the world is about to end, and Brooke tries to deflect, tries to tell him it's nothing, just business stress. But Ridge has heard every excuse before and knows when Brooke is lying to protect someone, especially him. And when he raises his voice demanding the truth, Brooke breaks down in tears, confessing that there is something he needs to know, something she never wanted him to find out this way. And before she can finish, Taylor walks in, her face tight with guilt and fear, and suddenly Ridge understands that this isn't just another secret. This is something that ties all of them together. Something rooted in the past, and when he asks, almost pleading now, what they're hiding, Taylor speaks the words that change everything, telling Ridge that years ago, long before the betrayals and reunions, before the marriages and divorces blurred together, there was a child Ridge believed was lost forever, a baby he was told didn't survive, and Ridge laughs at first, a sharp, disbelieving sound, because that pain was real, that grief carved into his soul. And he remembers standing in a hospital hallway feeling like his heart had been ripped out, remembers mourning a life he never got to hold. And the idea that any of this could be a lie feels impossible, cruel even, but Taylor insists, her voice trembling as she admits that the child lived, that the truth was hidden to protect everyone involved, and Ridge feels the room spin, his chest tightening as memories rush back, fragmented images of fear, confusion, and unanswered questions he buried long ago because it hurt too much to keep digging. And now Brooke confirms it, admitting that she found out recently through a series of medical records and a chance conversation that spiraled into something much bigger, something she couldn't ignore. And as Ridge struggles to breathe, Eric steps forward, finally speaking, telling his son that the child is alive, grown now, living a life completely separate from the Forresters, unaware of the truth about where they came from. And Ridge snaps, his voice echoing through the office as he demands to know how everyone could lie to him for so long, how they could let him live with that pain while his child was out there somewhere, alive, breathing, existing without knowing their father ever stopped loving them. And the anger is raw, explosive, years of grief transforming into fury. And while Brooke reaches for him, Ridge pulls away, pacing the room like a caged animal, demanding answers, names, details, anything that can ground him in reality. And Taylor, through tears, explains how complicated it was, how fear and good intentions twisted into something unforgivable, how they believed at the time they were protecting the child, protecting Ridge, protecting everyone from a scandal that could destroy lives. But Ridge hears none of it, because all he can think about is the birthdays he missed, the scraped knees he never kissed better, the first words, the first heartbreaks, the entire life that unfolded without him. And when he finally asks who this child is now, where they are, the room falls silent again. Because that answer is even more dangerous. And when Eric reveals that the child has been closer than Ridge ever imagined, woven into the edges of their world in ways no one recognized until now, Ridge freezes, his mind racing as he tries to connect dots that suddenly rearrange his entire understanding of the people around him. And when a name is spoken, one that Ridge knows, one that has crossed his path countless times, his knees nearly give out, because the realization is too big, too surreal. And he whispers the name like a prayer and a curse all at once, asking if it's really true, if the person standing in his life all this time is his child. And Brooke nods, sobbing now, confirming it, explaining how DNA results left no room for doubt, and Ridge feels something inside him break open, grief and wonder colliding in a way that leaves him shaking, because the child he mourned is not only alive, but has been living a life shaped by struggles and choices he never got to guide. And as the weight of it all crashes down, Ridge storms out, unable to face anyone, driven by a single overwhelming need to see this child with his own eyes, to know they're real, to hear their voice, and the confrontation that follows is anything but smooth, because when Ridge finally stands in front of the person who carries his blood, his fire, his legacy, the emotions are raw and chaotic, confusion colliding with anger, disbelief battling curiosity, and the child, blindsided by the revelation, feels betrayed by everyone, furious that their entire identity has been built on a lie, and Ridge, for all his confidence and control, is reduced to a man grasping for words, trying to explain decades of absence without sounding like a coward, trying to apologize for a choice he never made, and the pain between them is thick, heavy with what-ifs and lost time, and yet beneath it all is a pull neither of them can deny, something instinctive, something deeper than logic, and as the days pass, the shock slowly gives way to fragile conversations, moments where Ridge listens more than he speaks, where he learns who his child became without him, the strength they developed, the scars they carry, and every story is both a gift and a knife to the heart, because it proves they survived, but also proves how much they endured alone, and the ripple effects tear through the Forrester family, reigniting old conflicts and creating new ones. As Brooke and Taylor grapple with their roles in the deception, Eric faces the consequences of prioritizing legacy over truth, and the rest of the family struggles to adjust to a reality where the past refuses to stay buried. And through it all, Ridge is changed, stripped down to something more vulnerable than he's ever been, because discovering his lost child is alive doesn't just give him something back, it forces him to confront who he was, who he is, and who he wants to be moving forward. And in a quiet moment long after the shouting has stopped and the tears have dried, Ridge sits alone with his child, no cameras, no family pressure, just two people trying to build something from the ashes of a lie, and he admits the truth out loud for the first time, that he doesn't know how to make up for the years he lost, that he knows he can't erase the pain, but that he wants to try, that he wants to be there now, not as a hero or a savior, but as a father willing to listen, willing to earn trust one moment at a time. And as his child finally looks at him, really looks at him, there's no easy forgiveness, no instant healing, but there is something else, something fragile and real, a door cracked open just enough to let hope in. And as Ridge realizes that the greatest design of his life won't be sketched on paper or showcased on a runway but built through patience, honesty, and love, he understands that the truth coming out didn't just change his past, it gave him a future he never thought he'd have, one that will be messy, painful, and uncertain, but undeniably worth fighting for, because for the first time since the day he believed his child was gone forever, Ridge Forrester knows that some losses aren't permanent, that some miracles arrive late, and that even after decades of lies, the truth still has the power to bring a family back from the brink. What follows after that fragile beginning is not a smooth road or a neatly wrapped reconciliation, but a slow, emotionally charged unraveling of everything Ridge Forrester thought he understood about family, loyalty, and forgiveness, because once the truth is out, it doesn't sit quietly, it spreads, seeping into every corner of his life, touching every relationship, and forcing everyone involved to confront choices they made long ago and the damage those choices caused. And in the days after Ridge's first private conversation with his newly discovered child, the shock settles into something heavier, something more complicated, because reality sets in, and with it comes questions that have no easy answers, questions about why this secret was kept for so long, about who benefited and who suffered, and about whether love can truly survive such a profound betrayal. And Ridge finds himself replaying memories he once accepted as fact, now re-examining them through a new lens, moments that once felt random suddenly loaded with meaning, casual encounters that now feel like cruel jokes orchestrated by fate, and each realization hits him like a fresh blow, because the signs were there, scattered throughout the years, and he missed them, not because he didn't care, but because he trusted the people he loved to tell him the truth, and that trust, once unshakable, now feels dangerously fragile. And as word begins to spread through the Forrester family, reactions vary wildly, with some responding in disbelief, others in quiet guilt, and a few in outright defensiveness, because secrets like this don't exist in isolation. They are built brick by many hands, and when those bricks start to crumble, everyone scrambles to protect themselves, and Brooke, overwhelmed by remorse, tries to be there for Ridge in every way she knows how, cooking meals he barely touches, offering comfort he sometimes accepts and sometimes pushes away, because while she didn't create the lie, she carried it once she knew, and Ridge struggles with that, torn between gratitude for her honesty now and anger that it didn't come sooner, and Taylor, drowning in her own guilt, keeps her distance at first, convinced she has no right to ask for forgiveness, yet unable to stay away completely, because this secret shaped her life too, influenced decisions she made, paths she took, and relationships she nurtured or destroyed. And Eric, the patriarch who once believed he was doing what was best for the family, is forced to confront the cost of protecting a legacy at the expense of truth, and for the first time in a long while, Ridge sees his father not as a powerful figure who always had the answers, but as a flawed man who made a devastating mistake, and that realization is both heartbreaking and strangely humanizing. And while the older generation wrestles with accountability, the younger members of the family feel the tremors as well, questioning what else might be hidden, what other truths might be buried beneath carefully maintained narratives, because if something this big could be concealed for decades, what else don't they know? And in the middle of it all stands Ridge's child, caught in a storm they never asked for, grappling with an identity that has been ripped apart and hastily reassembled, struggling to reconcile the person they thought they were with the reality of being a Forrester, a name heavy with expectation, power, and public scrutiny, and they oscillate between wanting answers and wanting distance, between curiosity about the father they never knew and resentment toward the family that robbed them of a different life. And Ridge respects that hesitation, even when it hurts, because he knows he doesn't get to dictate the pace of healing, not after everything that was taken, and so he waits, listens, shows up without demanding anything in return, attending small moments that feel monumental to him. A shared coffee, a quiet walk, a conversation that doesn't end in anger, and each of these moments becomes a building block, not of forgiveness, but of understanding. And as time passes, Ridge begins to see pieces of himself reflected in his child, familiar expressions, shared instincts, a creative spark that feels eerily inherited, and those similarities are both comforting and painful, because they highlight what was lost and what remains possible. And slowly, the narrative begins to shift, from one of shock and betrayal to one of cautious rebuilding, though not without setbacks, because healing is never linear. And there are days when anger resurfaces unexpectedly, triggered by a memory, a careless comment, or a reminder of everything that can't be undone. And on those days, Ridge doesn't try to fix it, doesn't offer excuses or explanations. He simply acknowledges the pain, owning his absence even though it wasn't his choice, because he understands now that intent doesn't erase impact. And this approach, quiet and consistent, starts to make a difference not just with his child, but with the rest of the family, who watches Ridge evolves into a different kind of leader, one less driven by control and more by accountability. And this change ripples outward, influencing how conflicts are handled, how truths are confronted, and how relationships are valued. And Forrester Creations itself becomes a backdrop for these emotional shifts, its halls filled with whispers and speculation as the story threatens to become public, raising questions about reputation and scandal. But Ridge surprises everyone by refusing to hide, declaring that if the truth comes out, so be it, because he's done living in the shadow of lies. And this stance, bold and unapologetic, marks a turning point, not just professionally but personally, because it signals his commitment to authenticity, no matter the cost. And when the truth does eventually surface beyond the family, the reaction is intense, media scrutiny relentless, but Ridge stands firm, protecting his child from the spotlight as much as possible, shielding them from the worst of it. And in doing so, he finally gets to play the role he was denied for so long, that of a father who puts his child first, even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. And while the world speculates and judges, the real work happens behind closed doors, in moments of vulnerability and honesty, in apologies spoken without expectation of forgiveness, and in boundaries set and respected. And over time, the relationship between Ridge and his child begins to take on a shape that feels real, imperfect but genuine, built not on obligation or blood alone, but on choice, on the mutual decision to try. And as this bond strengthens, Ridge finds himself reflecting on his past relationships, recognizing patterns of avoidance and impulsivity that once defined him, and he begins to understand how those patterns might have influenced the choices others made on his behalf, not excusing them but contextualizing them. And this insight brings a measure of peace, not because the pain disappears, but because it becomes part of a larger story of growth and redemption. And as the family slowly recalibrates around this new reality, there are moments of hope that feel almost miraculous, shared laughter that doesn't feel forced, plans made without fear of collapse, and conversations that look toward the future instead of circling the past. And in one particularly quiet scene, Ridge watches his child interact with the rest of the family, sees them finding their place not as a replacement for what was lost, but as something entirely new, and the sight fills him with a profound sense of gratitude, because against all odds, something good is emerging from the wreckage, and he realizes that while the truth coming out shattered his world, it also freed him, giving him the chance to live more honestly than ever before. And as he looks ahead, aware that challenges still lie ahead, that wounds may reopen, and that forgiveness may take years if it comes at all, Ridge feels grounded in a way he never has, anchored by the knowledge that his life, once defined by what he lost, is now guided by what he's willing to fight for. And in that realization, he finds purpose not just as a designer, a leader, or a son, but as a father finally given the chance to show up, to listen, to learn, and to love without conditions. And while the past can never be rewritten, the future, uncertain and fragile as it is, stretches out before him filled with possibility. And for Ridge Forrester, that possibility is the greatest gift of all. A reminder that even after decades of silence, the truth can still speak, and when it does, it can change everything. And even as that fragile sense of possibility takes hold, life at Forrester Creations and within the family refuses to slow down, because revelations of this magnitude don't simply resolve themselves with time and good intentions, they demand continued reckoning. And Ridge soon learns that rebuilding a relationship with his child is only one part of a much larger emotional landscape that must be navigated carefully, because trust, once broken on this scale, doesn't just snap back into place, it has to be earned again and again through consistency, honesty, and restraint. And Ridge commits himself to that process with a determination that surprises even him, showing a patience he never knew he possessed, resisting the urge to overcompensate or control, understanding that his presence alone, steady and respectful, is what matters most right now. And his child, still wary but no longer closed off completely, begins to test that consistency in small ways, setting boundaries, asking difficult questions, sometimes pulling back without warning. And each time Ridge feels the sting of rejection, he reminds himself that this pain is nothing compared to the years of confusion and loss his child endured without answers. And so he absorbs it, learning to sit with discomfort instead of trying to fix it. And this shift doesn't go unnoticed by the rest of the family, who watch as Ridge handles conflict differently, choosing dialogue over confrontation, accountability over defensiveness. And this change begins to influence the broader family dynamic, encouraging more open conversations and fewer whispered secrets, though not everyone adapts easily, because for some, the truth threatens carefully curated identities and long-held narratives, and old rivalries flare up as blame is subtly reassigned, fingers pointing in every direction. And there are moments when it feels like the family might fracture under the weight of it all, but somehow the shared desire to move forward keeps pulling them back from the edge. And Brooke, ever hopeful yet painfully aware of her own role, struggles with insecurity, fearing that Ridge's focus on his child might create distance between them. And while Ridge reassures her that his commitment to her remains, he also makes it clear that some things must take priority now, that being a father isn't a role he's willing to compromise again. And this honesty, though difficult, ultimately deepens their connection because it's rooted in truth rather than fear. And Taylor, watching from a distance, begins to find her own path toward atonement, not through grand gestures, but through quiet support, respecting boundaries, offering help when asked, and accepting that forgiveness may never fully come. And Eric, carrying the weight of regret, takes steps to mend what he can, using his influence to protect Ridge's child from public scrutiny and internal pressure, acknowledging openly that legacy means nothing if it's built on lies. And this admission, coming from the family patriarch, marks a significant cultural shift, one that signals a new era for the Forresters, one where transparency is valued over image. And as weeks turn into months, Ridge and his child begin to establish rituals of their own, simple routines that create a sense of normalcy amid the chaos, regular dinners, shared projects, conversations about music, art, and aspirations that have nothing to do with fashion or family drama. And in these moments, Ridge gets glimpses of who his child truly is, beyond the circumstances of their birth or the shock of the revelation, and he finds himself genuinely impressed by their resilience, their perspective shaped by a life lived outside the Forrester bubble, and this admiration helps balance his regret, reminding him that while he missed years, his child grew into someone remarkable anyway, and that knowledge, bittersweet as it is, gives him peace, and the child in turn begins to see Ridge not just as a symbol of loss or betrayal, but as a flawed human being trying to do better. And this shift allows for moments of warmth that feel spontaneous rather than forced, shared laughter that surprises them both.